I'd like to announce that I'm not dead, because that's literally my biggest accomplishment this year so far. Speaking of which, between critically needing a therapy and not being able to afford it, I spent most of my time these past weeks growing a thick layer of mold and throwing my depression at GW2's ranked PvP ladder. Thanks to my little adventure, I can confirm that situation with Warrior and PvP in general has dramatically improved. Guild Wars 2's PvP is surprisingly well balanced after the most recent changes. Which doesn't mean it is well balanced. The aforementioned balance is still as fucked as general collective of unpaid brothel employees, but at least Scepter Catalyst was dealt with. Thanks to the hydrated one for that. Raise a glass in his name. Okay, I'm almost done with the bullshit. We can get to the actual reason we are here, and that is the Berserker. In less than a month since most recent changes, our angry boy gave Spellbreaker a run for his lunch money like I haven't seen since almost 5th grade. Before Spellbreaker enthusiasts start to mourn, let me quickly confirm that despite the nerf, he's not dead, and Berserker v Breaker fights usually come down to skill, which explains why I'm being turned into a JPEG on the bloody pavement half of the time. Also, Boon Rip is kind of broken in most 1v1 scenarios, since stability is also a boon, and who has the monopoly on stability dictates the pace of the engagement. Therefore, Spellbreaker is still kicking, and not just my ass, but everything in general. This patch, however, he no longer has the spotlight only for himself. Berserker received 2 meaningful changes impacting his PvP performance. Firstly, Immortal Champion was reworked, granting twice the uptime on Feel No Pain from Savage Instincts, on Blood Reckoning from Dead or Alive, and creating a reliable source of stability accessible for any build that would ever desire so. That was followed by cooldown reductions for Berserker's rage utilities. Short cooldowns on signature skills are really big strength for Berserker, especially considering that these skills in question grant Stun Break, Mobility, Block, and CC respectively, and all fuel your adrenaline, granting by extension ease of access to the rage itself. With these 2 changes, most Berserker builds were elevated from playable to viable. That, in combination with Berserker's uniquely strong interaction between Defy, Pain and Headbutt, create a solid contender for top spot amongst Warrior specs. Berserker probably won't overthrow his counterpart completely, since his power builds still get dumpstered by the same exact few specs, but now without the reliance of unblockable boon removal and counter to gain competitive edge in some of these situations. In other words, strengths of both sides are unique, but their weaknesses are the same. Why then, and when to use Berserker over Spellbreaker? Primo, when someone else handles the side node and you expect to teamfight and skirmish a little bit more. Feel No Pain and Defy Pain can soak up infinite amounts of damage in short time frame, and Blood Reckoning heals the more damage you deal. Which means, in teamfights, where it is easier for your AoE skills to hit more than one target, and your already potent self-sustain can shine even brighter, you are at your peak. There is, of course, the all-encumbering issue of every crowd control skill in the bloody game, but with enough stability to get your arse from point A to point B without munching on the floor, you have just enough buffer against bullshit to make an impact. Second obvious option is when you plan on playing Comedy build. Berserker can output massive damage if given a chance, and can melt Willbenders, most Ranger and Necro power builds, as well as Thieves and Revenants, but does poorly into dedicated supports because no cover conditions, and can get really messed up by anything that returns your conditions back to you. In other words, pick your poison. The same goes for Gunzerker. If you see enemy team with little to no hard engage, then feel free to play Duck Hunt. But if you see a Daredevil, a Willbender and Herald on the same team, consider swapping onto something more comfortable with handling bodies flying directly at you with malicious intent. Thanks to his synergy with Defy Pain and stances in general, Berserker can avoid being bursted down easily and still keep sustaining through damage after Defiant stance runs out. On top of that, Primal Bursts often have bigger effective range than their regular counterparts, and therefore are likely to clip something even if target you are aiming for dodged, which makes them better the more enemies are in close proximity. The same applies to rage skills. Often you can fully fill your adrenaline bar with just one skill because you hit more than one target. On top of which, hard lockdown from a headbutt and exceptional resistance to being locked down yourself in form of multiple stun breaks lets you set up takedowns or at least force defensive cooldowns without worrying about being taken down yourself. TLDR is, Berserker is slightly better teamfight spec than Spellbreaker, and so don't sleep on Berserker. If you sleep on Berserker, you're either happily married or about to have embarrassing non-verbal conversation about personal space. Jokes aside, including Blaze One, the average power difference between warrior specs have been reduced to the point where skill and your familiarity with a spec matters more than sheer advantages or disadvantages from playing one and not the other. And therefore you can finally play whatever spec you want and not be completely griefing. With that said, crapface out.